"You need to remove that ramp immediately, Mr. James. This is a community of standards." The words landed heavy, but Mr. Delroy James didn't flinch. He sat silently at the top of the ramp, his left hand trembling slightly on the armrest of his motorized wheelchair, the other gripping the manila envelope the HOA president had just handed him. A violation notice. Again. The third one this month. He blinked slowly as the man stood stiffly at the foot of the ramp, arms crossed over, a powder blue polo stretched tight over a sunburned belly. The man's name was Marvin Kemp, HOA president for the Sycamore Lakes development. Marvin had a way of talking that always made his contempt feel like it was dressed up in politeness, like thorns inside velvet gloves. "This is your final." "Warning," Marvin added, his voice just loud enough to catch the attention of Mrs. Epstein walking her Shih Tzu across the cul-de-sac. Mr. James didn't answer. He just nodded once, slow and tight, as if to say, "Message received." Then he turned his chair and rolled back inside. He could hear Marvin muttering behind him as he descended the little ramp that allowed him to live without depending on anyone. It was barely 6 feet long, made of clean wood, stained to match the trim. He'd even paid extra to have the railings lined with black mat to match the shutters. It wasn't some slapdash DIY thing. It was tasteful. It was necessary. And to them, it was offensive. The letter in his lap read, "You are hereby fined $100 per day for unapproved structural modification visible from the street. The ramp must be removed within 10 days to avoid escalation." 10 days. Delroy sighed. That was generous. The last one gave him 7. He wheeled over to the window and watched as Marvin swaggered back to his car. The HOA decal on his dashboard glinted in the sun. 2 houses over, someone had plastic flamingos all over their yard, bright pink, tacky as sin. No violations there. A few doors down, one of the board members had a Trump 2028 flag flying, like it was the 4th of July. But his ramp, that was the real problem. Delroy's eyes dropped to a photo on his bookshelf, him in uniform, younger, standing beside a chopper in Afghanistan. Another beside it, him with his late wife Marcia, grinning through a backyard cookout before the stroke took half his body and all his fire, but not his memory, and not his money. They didn't know who he was, didn't know that beneath his flannel, shirt and tremoring fingers, was a man who had built something real over decades, who'd lived quiet, humble, whose name wasn't just Delroy James, but appeared in fine print on deeds across 3 counties. They thought he was just an old man in a chair. Let them. Delroy didn't talk much to the neighbors. That suited the neighborhood just fine. Most of them were younger couples, starter families with tidy SUVs, half-empty juice boxes left in cup holders, and HOA newsletters tacked proudly to their fridge doors. Sycamore Lakes was one of those planned communities where the lawns were sharp, the smiles sharper, and anything that looked too personal was labeled unsightly. He had moved in 6 months ago, after Marcia passed. His daughter had begged him to come live closer, and when the physical therapist said the single-story homes and quiet street would be perfect for recovery, Delroy gave in. He should have looked closer. He didn't know about the HOA back then, or maybe he just didn't care. Back then he still believed people would act right if you were respectful, that if you moved quiet, stayed humble, paid your dues, nobody would bother you. He was wrong. The first fine had come just 2 weeks after the ramp was installed, structure installed without proper approval. Disrupts uniform curb appeal. Must be reviewed by committee. He had tried, really. He'd called, he'd sent emails, even showed up at the monthly meeting, waiting in that little folding chair at the back of the rec center while the board debated whether Halloween decorations should be limited to white pumpkins and orange string lights only. When it was finally his turn, he'd spoken soft. "I understand the process." "But I just had a stroke," he explained. The ramp is how I get to my own front door. I'll stain it, sand it, make it prettier if y'all need. But I need it." Marvin hadn't even looked up from his notes. "Well, we have procedures. You should have waited for written approval." Another board member, some woman in pearl earrings and a blazer with elbow pads, had chimed in, "And once we allow one exception, the whole neighborhood starts looking inconsistent." Someone else murmured agreement. "Exactly. Slippery. Slope." Delroy had left that night with a fine and a sour taste in his mouth. Since then the letters came regular, each one colder than the last. He'd paid some of them, ignored others. But it was the same song. They wanted that ramp gone. Didn't matter what it was for, only what it looked like. And every time Marvin showed up, he got bolder. Last week, he made a comment about retirement homes having better accommodations. Said maybe Mr. James would be more comfortable somewhere, specialized, like he was doing him a favor. But Delroy wasn't made of glass. The man had survived 2 wars, a corporate merger, a widowmaker stroke, and a childhood in a town, where you could be black, bright, and broke, and still come out fighting. So he stopped asking, stopped explaining, and started researching. One evening, while sipping peppermint tea, he wheeled himself over to the old file cabinet he kept under the bookshelf and pulled out a dusty leather folder. Inside were neatly labeled packets: trust, agreements, land contracts, and development holdings, all part of the investment group he and his late cousin Clyde had built slowly over the last 20 years. Property was in his blood, and now property was his weapon. He started small, an empty lot behind the Sycamore Lakes entrance sign, listed for sale by a retiring couple. Delroy's offer was in cash, clean and quiet. 2 weeks later, the old brown house with the rotting fence, the one Marvin had tried to get condemned, also sold. Off-market, no signs posted. Delroy's lawyer handled everything through a shell trust. Marvin didn't notice, but the neighbors would soon. The next letter was bolder. Not just a fine, a notice of lien intent. They were threatening to place a legal claim on his home for continued violation of HOA compliance standards. Delroy read it once, then again, then folded it in half with a quiet breath and set it on the kitchen counter. He didn't speak, didn't call his daughter, didn't vent in the veterans' group chat. Just wheeled himself over to the little corner nook by the back window and opened his laptop. He already had his eye on the next property. Marvin Kemp didn't know it yet, but one of the other board members, Cheryl Faulkner, the pearl earring, lady with the elbow-padded blazers, had just refinanced her home after her husband's job loss, and their mortgage was owned by a lender Delroy's firm had a 35% stake in, just enough pull to get some eyes on the file, just enough influence to get options. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't personal. Yet still, Delroy wasn't rushing. Power wasn't in what you said, it was in what you withheld. So when Marvin strutted up to the ramp again 2 days later with a clipboard and that usual smugness on his face, Delroy played. I see the fines aren't working," Marvin said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Maybe a lien will get your attention." Delroy looked at him with that slow, heavy calm. "Is that so?" "You may not like the rules," Marvin added, shifting his stance, "but we all agreed to them when we moved in. Sycamore Lakes is a community of order, not exceptions." He said that word like it was something rotten. Delroy nodded once, as if considering it. "You live in the greenhouse, right? The one on the bend with the cracked driveway?" Marvin blinked. "Excuse me?" "Just making conversation," Delroy said, tone flat, unreadable. Marvin's face twisted. "You'd better not be making threats, old man." Delroy's smile was patient. "I don't make threats, son. I make investments." He turned his chair and rolled back inside, leaving Marvin standing in the midday sun, face flushed and confused. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the sprinkler systems clicked on in sync, Delroy made another call. Hi, Renee, it's Delroy James again. Let's move forward with the offer on 114 Sycamore Bend. Full price cash. I want the HOA to send the next violation notice to my mailbox. He clicked the phone shut and stared at the street. Neighbors were still smiling. Walking dogs. Pretending. Like they didn't notice the man in the wheelchair with the ramp. But that ramp, it was still there. And soon, so would he, on the deed to half their neighborhood. They didn't want him here. Good. They'd be real mad when they found out he was the landlord. The first shift was so small no one noticed. A for sale sign vanished overnight. A quiet moving truck pulled in before dawn. A house that had sat ignored for months was suddenly lit from inside. Curtains drawn, the porch light replaced with a soft golden bulb. It was Delroy's. He didn't move in, of course. He had no need to. But it was his now. Paid in full, title transferred, quietly shielded by one of the dozens of LLCs tucked under his real estate portfolio. The utilities were still in the former owner's name, a little trick his lawyer knew how to manage. No alarm bells, and then another, this time the corner lot, the one with the magnolia tree that Marvin had been petitioning to trim for years. The owner had been eager to sell. Too many rules, she said. Delroy didn't even haggle. He paid her asking price in less than 3 days. He made sure to introduce himself, quietly, respectfully. "Welcome to your new beginning," she said, with a relieved smile. He nodded, replying, "Mine too." The HOA board still hadn't pieced it together. Not yet. But Marvin. He was starting to itch. At the next community meeting, he slammed his folder on the folding table. "Why haven't we enforced the lien yet? Why is that man still ignoring us?" Mrs. Faulkner sighed. "We're waiting on legal review. It's not as simple as we thought." "I don't care how simple it is," Marvin barked. "That ramp is still there. He's mocking us." No one responded. They all knew Marvin had a habit of taking things personal, especially when someone didn't jump at his bark. Then Jeremy, the soft-spoken treasurer with wire glasses and a calculator, for a brain, said, "Actually, did you guys know 211 Sycamore was purchased last week by an out-of-state investment group?" Everyone turned toward him, and so was 302. Same trust name on both titles, something called J&M Holdings. Mrs. Faulkner's brow furrowed. "J&M?" She looked over at Delroy, who had quietly begun attending every board meeting. Sitting in the back with his thermos, nodding politely, never raising his voice. "Did you say J&M?" she asked. Delroy just smiled. "Funny," he said. "Those initials remind me of my wife. Marcia and me used to sign our cards like that." Jeremy blinked. "Oh." Marvin stood, pushing back his chair. "You trying to buy your way out of rules?" "No," Delroy said, still calm. "Just buying space to breathe." Marvin leaned in. "You think this is a game? You're going to lose. We have legal authority." Delroy's face never changed. "I read your bylaws, all of them." He pulled a worn copy from his bag and placed it on the table, gently, like it was a holy book. "And I've already spoken to county zoning. That ramp? ADA compliant. You're skating the edge of federal violation every time you issue those fines." Silence. "I didn't fight in 2 wars just to be bullied over wood. And nails," he added, voice low, steady. "But don't worry, Marvin, I'm not here for revenge." He stood slowly, carefully, leaned on his cane and met Marvin's stunned glare. "I'm here for ownership." By the next HOA meeting, 2 more properties had flipped hands. Still no signs, no bidding wars. Just quick closings, quiet moves, and names that no one recognized on the tax rolls. But Jeremy noticed. He came to the meeting early that Thursday, eyes wide and breath shallow. "Marvin, we need to talk," he whispered, clutching his iPad. "Something's happening with the properties. Look." Marvin scrolled. The screen showed title records, owner, J&M Holdings LLC mailing address, care of James Equity Partners. Agent of record, Delroy E. James. Marvin's mouth dried. He owns 5 homes now, Marvin, Jeremy whispered, all within a block radius. If he buys one more, he'll qualify for a board seat. Marvin's knuckles whitened around the table edge. They looked up, and there he was. Delroy, rolling in with that slow grace, greeted Cheryl with a nod and offered Jeremy a peppermint from the tin in his coat. Then he settled into the seat, nearest the board table, not the back row this time. Marvin couldn't help himself. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," Delroy said, unwrapping his candy. "I know it does." He placed a folder on the table, neatly labeled Petition for Board Inclusion, Delroy James. 6 property IDs, all with copies of the deeds, notarized, all verified. According to Section 6, subsection B of your own bylaws, any resident who owns more than 20% of homes within the HOA boundary may submit to fill a vacant seat. Marvin stood. "This is a stunt. It's math," Delroy said calmly, "and law. 2 things I'm quite familiar with." Mrs. Faulkner leaned in, squinting at the documents. "This looks legit." "It is," Delroy said. "But don't worry. I'm not asking anyone to step down." He turned toward the rest of the board. "I'm just here to represent the interests of my tenants. You know, the families living in the homes I now own." Cheryl looked ill. "You've been planning this," Marvin hissed. "I've been living this," Delroy corrected. "There's a difference." Then he took out a second folder. Inside, a letter from the ADA Civil Rights Division, acknowledging a formal complaint filed against Sycamore Lakes HOA for repeated violations of accessibility law, with a pending investigation already underway. Jeremy groaned. Cheryl covered her mouth. Marvin's jaw twitched. "And just so you're not caught off guard," Delroy added, "the county assessor's office also received my request to review whether Sycamore Lakes qualifies for certain community subsidies. If discrimination is proven, those funds are frozen." He smiled, slow and polite. "Would hate for that to affect your landscaping budget." He left the meeting early, didn't need to stay. He'd already planted the seeds, and he knew how. Things grew, slow, quiet, but deep. As he rolled down the ramp outside the community rec hall, the very ramp they'd tried to fine him into removing, he looked up at the sign someone had posted on the bulletin board. It was faded, but legible. Sycamore Lakes, a community of pride, order, and unity. Delroy chuckled. "Not yet," he whispered, "but soon." The HOA newsletter tried to spin it. "We're excited to welcome Mr. Delroy James as a new board participant, bringing a wealth of experience and community-minded ownership to Sycamore Lakes." They didn't mention the federal complaint, didn't mention the shift in voting power, didn't mention how Cheryl Faulkner abruptly resigned due to stress, or how the treasurer's access to HOA funds had been frozen pending a forensic audit. But Delroy noticed the tone. Less smug, more careful. The meetings changed, too. Gone were the long-winded debates about Halloween inflatables or mailbox paint codes. Now discussions focused on things like accessibility grants, community equity training, and modifying bylaws to reflect ADA compliance. Funny how fast order changes once power shifts. Delroy didn't gloat. He didn't even speak much. He let his presence and paperwork and speak for him. What people didn't realize was Delroy had always understood systems. He just chose to work behind them. Most of his life he'd helped other people climb, built portfolios, advised on tax shields, helped families protect land their great-grandparents nearly lost. He'd done it all from the back seat, never needing the credit. But this was personal. Marvin, though, couldn't take the heat. 2 weeks after Delroy's appointment to the board, Marvin exploded in a meeting. Red-faced, voice rising as he slammed his palm on the table. "This is a takeover," he barked. "We're letting some angry cripple with a grudge burn everything down. The room went still. Even Cheryl, who had returned just to vote on a landscaping bid, gasped audibly. Jeremy blinked. Marvin, but Delroy just tilted his head. "I'd like that on record," he said quietly, tapping the recorder on his phone. "Repeat it if you like." Marvin stormed out. That night, a motion was filed by 3 board members to formally remove him for violating the HOA's Code of Conduct and Anti-Discrimination Clause, the same clause he had helped write. The irony? Delroy abstained from the vote. He didn't need to swing the axe. The weight of Marvin's own words did it for him. The next week, Marvin's house went up for sale, not officially, not publicly, but quietly, through back channels. Jeremy let it slip during a budget meeting. He's panicked. Thinks you're going to turn the neighborhood into a rental dump. Delroy just sipped his coffee. "I want what's fair." Jeremy glanced around, lowered his voice. "Are you planning to buy it?" Delroy smiled. "You tell me." That evening, the porch light on Marvin's greenhouse flickered out for good. And Delroy's ramp, still standing, still strong. In fact, 2 other residents had started installing their own. One for a visiting parent, another for a child in recovery, and this time, no violations, no fines, no Marvin, just space to breathe. Spring came early to Sycamore Lakes. The dogwoods bloomed in perfect rows. The lawns still gleamed with that manicured symmetry the HOA was so proud of, but something else had changed. The air felt lighter. The greetings at mailboxes were longer. The eyes that used to dart away when Delroy wheeled past now lingered, some with curiosity, some with guilt, most with quiet respect. At the March board meeting, Delroy sat at the head of the table. No one argued it. He didn't ask for the seat. Didn't campaign. But with Marvin gone, Cheryl retired, and Jeremy stepping back for family reasons, the vote had come without resistance. One by one, neighbors had pulled him aside, sometimes on their porches, sometimes while trimming hedges, and to say thank you for not backing down, thank you for showing them they could push back too, thank you for reminding everyone that a community wasn't built on mulch regulations and mailbox shapes, but on dignity. One neighbor, in particular, Maria Gonzalez, had approached with tears in her eyes. Her son Luis had been wheelchair-bound since a car accident the year before. They'd been fined for installing a temporary ramp, told it was too steep, too industrial, out of compliance. She handed him a photo of Luis smiling from their front porch, the new ramp gleaming in the morning sun. "No fines this time," she whispered. Delroy held the photo gently. That's how it should have always been. That weekend, the HOA held its annual Spring Forward celebration. Bounce houses, potluck dishes, tables draped in pastel colors. Delroy didn't usually go to things like that, but this time he did. Not for the fanfare, but for the sight of a little boy racing down a ramp in a red chair with flames painted on the wheels. For the neighbor who offered him sweet tea without pity in her eyes. For the sound of children laughing without pause when he wheeled past, and somewhere behind it all, he imagined Marcia. She would have loved this. By month's end, Delroy had quietly bought one more property, not in Sycamore Lakes, but next door in the sister development, where the HOA was struggling to keep members. He wasn't buying to take over. He was buying to protect, to create space where dignity wasn't up for debate. A few weeks later, at the next meeting, someone asked him, half joking, half awed, "Mr. James, what made you even want to stay here after all they did?" Delroy looked up, then out the window at the ramp they once called an eyesore. "I don't run from fire," he said quietly. "I build something better in its place." The greenhouse stood empty for 3 months. After Marvin's sudden departure, no one touched it. The paint peeled, the hedges grew wild, the porch light blinked like it was trying to forget. Some said it felt cursed. Others just didn't want to be the one to inherit all that bad energy. Then one morning a discreet "sold" sign appeared in the lawn. No announcement. No open house. Just a black SUV and a delivery van unloading new furniture by dusk. Delroy watched from his porch as a young black couple stepped out, the woman pushing a stroller, the man guiding her with one hand on the small of her back. The baby cooed as the mother took a long look at the ramp leading to Delroy's door, then up at the man beside her. "I told you this neighborhood was changing," she said softly. Delroy raised his hand in a gentle wave. The man waved back. That night, he slept deeper than he had in years. 2 weeks later, the board voted to formally remove the bylaw requiring aesthetic approval for disability accessibility structures. Unanimous. Jeremy, now a civilian member again, gave Delroy a soft nod before signing off the vote. "You changed more than the rules, man," he said quietly. "You changed us." Delroy didn't say much in reply. He just opened his folder, pulled out the last property deed he'd acquired, the one nearest the retention pond, perfect for building something new, and slid it across the table. "I'd like to donate this parcel to the community," he said. "Build something for the kids, maybe a garden, something they can touch, plant, care for, something that lasts." Someone sniffled. Cheryl reached for a tissue. He rolled himself outside before the meeting ended. The sun was setting golden across the street and the air smelled like rain that never came. As he eased himself down the same ramp they'd once called disruptive, he noticed a small chalk drawing at the bottom, a heart with flames around it, and a stick figure in a wheelchair smiling wide. Beneath it, in crooked purple letters, it read, "Thank you, Mr. D." He chuckled. Not loud, not performative, just policy like something had been set right. Moral reflection. Sometimes power doesn't come with noise, it doesn't arrive shouting or demanding to be seen. Sometimes it rolls in slow, steady, quiet, deliberate, and simply refuses to move. They tried to erase him with rules. He rewrote the rules with presence. Let that ramp stand for every time they told you to shrink, to move, to hide. Let it. Remind them that we were here, and we are still building ramp by ramp, block by block, home by home,